Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Dan Griffin and I'm Support Revolution's Head of Marketing. I'll be online with you today to introduce our speaker, kicking off the main subjects for discussion and answering or forwarding any of your additional questions to our speaker. But just a few housekeeping points before we begin. You'll notice that we've muted everybody automatically. That's to ensure that we have minimal noise disruption throughout the webinar. But there is a text chat box on your screen that you can use to send me messages, which I will answer privately or forward to our speaker if you have any questions you'd like answered in this session. So do make use of that. You'll also find in that window we've placed a few additional resources for you to download. One is the white paper that accompanies today's session. This outlines what the traditional legislative patching process is. It compares it with our own processes and outlines the main pros and cons of each approach. I highly recommend downloading that for future reference. The other download is a fact book that gives you information on third-party support generally and Support Revolution specifically, outlining the pros and cons of why you would consider moving from Oracle or SAP support to ourselves. Obviously, I'd recommend downloading that as well. But on to the reason why we're all here today. If you're watching this, you're currently getting your legislative patches from Oracle or SAP and are probably wondering if there's a better way. Oracle and SAP charge a huge amount to support their products, and unfortunately their methods can often lead to frustration. We hear from many organizations who are being forced to upgrade their stable systems just so that they continue receiving those legislative patches, or from organizations who have the same problems again and again each year trying to patch and repatch systems that have been broken by their vendors' one-size-fits-all approach. But are there any alternatives? To help answer this question, we've asked Praveen Nair, Support Revolution Solution Development Manager, onto the webinar to talk through the pros and cons of what options you have. Praveen has over 20 years of experience in building high-quality solutions for both Oracle and SAP systems, and he's worked globally across both the private and public sectors, specializing in legislative patches and problem solving. One of his many responsibilities is leading the legislative patching team at Support Revolution, so he is the perfect person to talk through this subject with us today. Hello, Praveen.
Hello, Dan.
So Praveen, the first question that we should probably cover is, why do we need legislative patches in the first place? What is their purpose and how does that work?
Well, Dan, quite simply, governments around the world implement changes through political initiatives. And when these initiatives are announced, it has a direct impact on organizations and people who work in these organizations. So it is very important that vendors provide their customers with the necessary patches for their software products, mainly in order to comply with these legislative requirements. Non-compliance can have a serious impact in areas like taxation, employee salaries, benefits, pensions, etc. The customers are also at the risk of incurring penalties. As part of our service, we provide regulatory patches globally. It is very common to have legislative changes or patches released frequently, particularly in the areas of payroll, mainly because it sits in the intersection of heavily regulated functions like tax, expenses, pensions, benefits, etc. However, in the recent past, we have seen reforms in the financials area like making tax digital here in the UK. At a very high level, we can think of legislative changes as an umbrella term, covering the most common and significant changes. The most common changes will typically be changes to the tax rates and thresholds, statutory payments, pensions, etc. The significant changes, on the other hand, will cover one-off changes that usually results from a new legal act or reform. For example, the PAY modernization change in Ireland, which enables real-time reporting to the Revenue Office, or the Making Tax Digital change in the UK, which simplifies taxation for businesses and individuals. So I hope I was able to give you a good idea about the kind of patches we work on. And in this session, we will cover our patching process mainly for Oracle and SAP.
Thanks for that, Praveen. That was a really good intro. So just following on from that, what is the current Oracle SAP process that organizations are probably following?
Well, vendors like ourselves, Oracle or SAP, are all registered as software developers with regulatory authorities. So this gives us an early insight into what legislative changes might be coming our way, enabling us to understand the changes and impact on the system, build and test the patches before release. Typically, companies like Oracle plan for an early adopter program a few weeks in advance of the final release of the patches. The early adopter program usually runs for 2 weeks, in which the customer needs to commit to testing these beta patches and attend a daily conference call with the development representatives. This is to ensure that any issues are highlighted and resolved promptly. At the end of the early adopter program, the changes identified as a result of the testing will be applied and added to the final patch. Subsequently, the final patch is then made available to all customers. Typically, after the final patch is released, additional patches are also released, and this usually includes bug fixes, additional functionality that may not have been originally incorporated into the release. The customer then tests these patches and they release into their production instances subject to successful testing.
Okay, so that process makes sense, but what are the problems with it? Where are organizations getting frustrated?
So Dan, the big issue with vendor provided patches are support is only available for mainstream products or modules, and the customers are typically forced to upgrade to newer versions where they may not necessarily see any added value. The patches may include features or changes that may not be relevant to the customer, but as they are part of the patch, the customer does not have an option to exclude it, which can sometimes have an impact on their current processes or customizations. In some instances, vendors may not choose to release a patch for a change. This could be due to the commercial viability of the solution or the effort it takes to develop something for a short-term change. In such situations, the customers often end up with their own custom solution or buy a third-party tool, which can have its own set of issues, or end up chasing the vendor development for support. To cite some examples, we have not seen any patches being released for either the Making Tax Digital or for the recently announced COVID furlough scheme here in the UK. So as a support partner, we provide support not just for mainstream products, but also support customers who are on older versions, which may not be currently supported by vendors like Oracle or SAP. We have a varied portfolio of customers, from a European recruiting giant where we provide payroll support to a European manufacturer and retailer who are on an older version of Oracle EBS. We also work very closely with UK councils on both Oracle and SAP, wherein in addition to the support, we have also delivered the value-added services like Making Tax Digital.
Okay, so customers are being either forced to upgrade to keep receiving those legislative patches, and even when they receive those legislative patches, there's still frustrations and issues. What are the options available to people if they want to change, or just generally?
So the first option is staying with vendor. Now, the benefits include customers can be certain that for the mainstream products, patches will be provided by the vendor. There is limited need for workarounds as the source codes are vendor owned. Now, on the other hand, staying with the vendor means customers need to pay for support to get the latest patches, which can be very expensive. Vendor provided patches tend to include features or changes that may not be relevant to the customer and can impact existing processes or customizations. However, as support is sold as a package, the customer can end up paying for features that they don't necessarily need. All-in-one patches means the customer also has to plan for multiple rounds of testing to ensure that the functionality is protected, including any existing processes or customizations. Quite often, after the final patch is released, additional patches are also released as bug fixes or to cover new or missed functionalities, which can be demanding on the customer's time and resource. So the second option is to develop in-house. Now, the advantage of developing in-house solution is the customer has control over the functionality that needs to be built, and it ties in with the customizations that they have. Any existing customizations are protected, and the in-house team will have a good knowledge of existing processes, which will help the development process. Now, the downside to that would be vendors will not support this, which in turn will invalidate any existing support agreements. Secondly, this is a resource-intensive exercise, and the in-house team will require specialized skill set to make these changes. From a cost perspective, this is a very expensive process, and the in-house team may not always get the current information from legislative bodies, mainly because they won't be registered with the regulatory bodies to get the latest information.
And is this option quite risky? From my perspective, my main concern would be, you've got to hire subject matter experts in house. Are they going to be utilized, all year?
No, they won't be utilized the whole year. Like you said earlier, it is a risky proposition, mainly because I think that the key thing we need to understand here is that the support agreement with the vendor will be invalidated, because effectively you're trying to build something that has been already provided, and you're kind of building on top of that. So that means if there are any issues later in the future, vendors like Oracle or SAP will not even touch it with the barge pole. The third option is third-party support. It is quite simply the most cost-effective option available without compromising on quality or the efficiency of the deliverable. The patches are tailored to customer-specific needs, taking into consideration the unique processes and customizations. So you only pay for what you need. Just like Oracle and SAP, we are also registered as software developers with relevant regulatory bodies, giving us the same insight to legislative changes and enabling us to release our patches broadly within the same time frames. We follow the same development standards as the vendors, making it easier for customers to return to official vendor support programs in the future, should they choose to. We support customers with quick resolution of issues that arise even after go live, and include customizations. In situations where we are unable to access vendor provided source codes, we always focus on providing effective workarounds, keeping customer processes and customizations in mind.
Okay, so from what you've explained, you've got three options: staying with the vendor, developing a solution in-house, or moving to a third-party support provider like Support Revolution. Can you go into a bit more detail around, if an organization were to move to Support Revolution, what the new legislative patching process would look like?
Sure. To start with, internally at Support Revolution, we treat any legislative changes as a mini project, and we follow our 5-step process for patching. So the process starts with identifying the legislative changes through the relevant country-specific legislative or regulatory bodies and independent agencies. Once all the changes have been identified, the requirements are mapped against each customer's payroll configuration and are shared with the key customer stakeholders. Each requirements are discussed with the customer, and a prioritized list is produced based on their specific needs and requirements. Any requirements that are not relevant to the customer are excluded from the release. This avoids the burden of additional testing for the customer. The build and delivery stage of the patch is also an area where we differ from other vendors. While the traditional vendors release one-size-fits-all patch and leave testing and refinement entirely to their customers, Support Revolution takes a more consultative approach. We offer 2 delivery models depending on the customer preference. We provide a single patch with all the changes so that the customer can conduct their testing in a single focus period. The second option is to have the patches released for each change. The phased delivery model helps the customer spread the testing over a certain period and takes into account the availability of the customer's in-house testing resources. We also develop the patches in the customer-specific instances, and they're thoroughly tested by our own team as well as the customer's project team. In addition to providing a weekly update on the development, we also provide an option for the customer to have weekly UAT meetings to review the progress and address any issues that may arise. Once the UAT is completed and signed off, the patches are then applied by the customer team to their production instances on an agreed date. While it is not uncommon for customers to experience teething issues post go live, we provide production support for all patching projects and engage with our customers to resolve any issues that may arise after the go live. All issues are logged and tracked within our service desk team and are subject to strict SLA for timely resolutions. The incidents are assigned to named individuals who will work on the incidents and are available to the customer directly by phone. For high priority issues, we also provide consultants available on site as well. I hope you can see that unlike other vendors, our patching process is highly customer focused, and we have the advantage of being able to produce bespoke patches for our customers, which are tailored to their specific requirements and technical needs.
Thanks for that, Praveen. And just following up on that final statement, so each patch is tailored, so we don't produce bundle patches. We produce patches that are for a specific customer.
That's correct. That's correct, Dan. In terms of the bundle process itself, I mean, we leave it entirely to the customer to make that decision depending on their requirements of testing. So we can actually bundle a patch and provide it as a one go, or drip feed the changes so that they can test the changes individually.
Great. And the major issue that we saw with Oracle and SAP legislative patching was that they only provide patching for their latest versions. What do we provide patching for?
We provide patching across the board, be it unsupported versions. So we can actually provide patches from, if we take an instance for Oracle, we start from 11i onwards, from release 11i all the way up to the latest released version.
So finally then, Praveen, the conclusion, I mean, who is third-party support right for? If you're listening to this, what are the situations that you should probably be in to be looking at a third-party support solution for legislative patching?
Well, Dan, that's a good question, basically, because from a third-party support perspective, we recommend our support mainly for, I would probably say broadly across 3 different types of customers. Customers who are on old product versions, possibly unsupported, and do not currently have a plan or capability to upgrade to newer versions. The requirements are quite simply to have these products patched for handling legislative changes. The second type of customers are those who are happy with the current system and are tired of paying huge license fees just for product support. And finally, for those customers who plan to move away from their existing ERP products to a different vendor, it could be a Workday, Financial Force, etc., but needs interim support while that decisions are being made.
That's great. Thank you, Praveen, for that incredibly interesting session. Following up on Praveen's last slide and recommendation, we've also put together an in-depth PDF guide that covers all the topics that we've spoken about today, from the vendor's approach to patching to why you should consider moving across to third-party support. The link to download that is on the screen right now, but you can also find a PDF copy in the resources tab on your screen, like I mentioned earlier. Looking through the questions we've received so far in the session, I believe we've covered them all as part of the conversations that have already taken place. The few that we haven't answered are quite in-depth and specific, so I promise you we will come back to you separately. That said, if you do want a more in-depth conversation on any of the subjects that we've raised today, you can contact us via phone or email using the details that are on the screen right now. And finally, thank you to everyone who've signed in today to listen, and thanks again to Praveen for your time. Also, remember, you're going to be sent a recording of this webinar to your email address, and we recommend downloading the accompanying white papers and fact sheets in the system window before you close it. We hope you've had a great day, and goodbye.